things are going to change. That's the one thing we can be guaranteed of.
Yeah, dude, they've been pretty quiet on the home front.
Very quiet. Too quiet.
Very quiet.
Suspiciously quiet. Or as my kids would say, sus. Sus. So
I don't know. I think there's a very real chance that he could make his way down to Atlanta or maybe Carolina.
Here's a bold one for you. They give him that transition tag, and a team like Washington that needs a quarterback and would love to take the focus on their team away from Dan Snyder and the ownership issues. Mm-hmm. I could see that happening too. I mean, this is what I love about NFL. I mean, it used to be that the NFL offseason was kind of boring. Mm-hmm. Well, they're catching up. This is pretty fun. There's almost a hot stove for the NFL like there is in baseball now. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of FFB from the 50. We are starting into the 2023 season. We've taken our little rest. Fantasy football season's been over. We've opened our presents. I've had my turkey and my ham. Now it's time to get back to it. Now, the actual start of the fantasy football season doesn't start for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. For me, like 2 or 3 days.
Well, yeah.
Because you know how I am. But we can't ignore the draft that's coming up. So, with that being said, I have a very special guest with me. I'm going to let him introduce himself to you. I'm going to just give my opinion of this man before he talks, though. This may be one of the most cerebral football players that I've ever played against in fantasy football. He knows way more about the college game than I do, and these are the kind of things that I want on this show. So, without any further ado, who are you?
Thanks, Dan. That was a lot. I'm Patrick Wilson. I've been a long-term or a lifelong football fan. I'm somebody that I followed in college. I did some radio broadcasting for St. Joe. I did the color commentary when I was there. And I follow the game very closely. I do a lot of sports betting, so I follow it all year long. And I'm an avid fantasy footballer. I've been for 15 years or so. So it's something I've always been involved with.
Yep, absolutely. And I can tell you, he knows what he's doing. I've gone head to head with him. I'd say a few times now at this point.
You've got a good team.
Yeah, win some, lose some, but so far I'm doing all right. So. All right, Patrick's on this show because we do have the NFL draft coming up, and there's absolutely fantasy football ramifications from that. But I don't know the college game like Patrick does, and when it comes to being able to analyze things, Patrick is one of the best that I know. So we're going to approach this. We're hoping to do a multi-part series leading up to the draft. I am a Chicago Bears and Indianapolis Colts fan, so that's probably where I'm going to spend a lot of my time focusing on those two teams. Patrick, who are you going to be focusing on?
Well, I'm a big Colts fan, but generally I tend to, because of my, I don't want to say my background, but because the amount of time that I invest in sports betting, I tend to try to dabble a little bit across the league. I don't spend too much time on any one team, and I gather a decent amount of information on all the teams across the board because it helps me formulate where the teams are likely to go, where they're coming from, and the directions moving forward.
Perfect. Sounds good. And that's what we need on this show because that's the kind of stuff that I don't do. So hopefully between the two we can balance things out. Hopefully. So we'll see. All right. So I want to get started here by saying that right now as we're filming this, it is March 4th. There is still a lot of time for a lot of things to change. And that's why we're looking to do this as a multi-part series leading up to the draft. We have the quarterback carousel that has not really, I don't think, has evolved at all yet. We still don't know where Derek Carr is going to go for sure. We have our suspicions. Aaron Rodgers is a wild card. Jimmy G is a wild card. So keep in mind, any of those guys go to any of these quarterback needy places. This might, drastically skew things. Mm-hmm. So, but what we're going to go by today on March 4th, not sure when this video is going to actually be edited and put out, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 days, things are going to change. That's the one thing we can be guaranteed of.
Yeah, we've got the beginnings of free agency coming along here relatively in short order. So things are gonna move here pretty fast. As things stand, it kind of looks like the talk with Aaron Rodgers going to New York might be kind of cooling off a little bit. I don't think necessarily that means he's going to return to Green Bay. I know that's the first instinct that a lot of people have. But if you listen to a lot of the commentary coming out of Green Bay, it looks clear that I'm not sure they want him back.
And I don't blame them. I wouldn't want him back either, no matter how talented he is.
It seems like they believe that Jordan Love might be their guy going forward. I've heard some commentators coming out of the Green Bay camps that they believe Jordan Love has the physical tools to potentially be an MVP caliber candidate. So, if that's the case, given his age, given where he's at in terms of his contract, it's important that they move on that, sooner rather than later. So, does Aaron Rodgers go out to Las Vegas? That's what I initially thought. But matching him back up with Devontae, and given Derek Carr's now absence from Oakland, it looked like we were moving in that direction. But now that might have cooled off. Maybe Rodgers goes to Carolina, or maybe he goes to New Orleans if Carr doesn't go there. It's a crapshoot right now.
Tampa Bay loves those veteran quarterbacks.
Yeah, they do. They've been pretty quiet on the home front.
Very quiet. Too quiet.
Very quiet.
Suspiciously quiet. Or as my kids would say, sus. Sus. So, me personally, I think here's what we're going to see. I'm not willing to put money on this. I do think Aaron Rodgers is going to wind up out in Vegas with the Raiders. I think Derek Carr is going to wind up with the New York Jets. And I think Lamar Jackson's going to get his contract. I know there's been a lot of speculations that what they're going to do is they're going to give him that qualified franchise tag where, go out, find another offer. We can either choose to match it or we'll get those first round picks. I don't really think he's going to leave. I really don't. I think he's going to stay put.
Yeah, see, I I can understand why someone would believe that. There's a part of me that is certainly sympathetic to that argument. They do have the exclusive franchise tag they could put on him. They have I believe a transition tag they could put on him, which would basically mean anybody that wanted to get him would have to pay him and then give, I believe, like 2 first-round picks for him. So it would be expensive. But at the same time, Lamar is representing himself. He does not have an agent, and the relations with Baltimore and him are kind of not in a great place right now.
Right.
So I think the tea leaves have always kind of, or I shouldn't say the tea leaves, but the people in the know have always said that these things typically work out with a tag, and then he ends up coming back and maybe he holds out in camp, but I don't know. I think there's a very real chance that he could make his way down to Atlanta or maybe Carolina, because Carolina, they were pretty active in the Derek Carr sweepstakes this week during the Combine. That might be a smokescreen to hide some of their intentions. I think it's probably likely he goes back to Baltimore, but I'm not ready to rule out that he makes his way down to the NFC South somewhere.
Here's a bold one for you. They give him that transition tag, and a team like Washington that needs a quarterback and would love to take the focus on their team away from Dan Snyder and the ownership issues. Mm-hmm. I could see that happening too. I mean, this is what I love about NFL. I mean, it used to be that the NFL offseason was kind of boring. Mm-hmm. Well, they're catching up. This is pretty fun. There's almost a hot stove for the NFL like there is in baseball now. It's fun.
Yeah,
I like it.
The NFL has done a fantastic job over these last couple of years of kind of stirring the intrigue in the offseason. For years, you kind of ended in early February, and then it kind of really went quiet until free agency, and things stirred up for a couple of weeks, and then it was really dead until training camps in June and in July. But the NFL has really done a nice job kind of spacing their league schedule around to kind of keep the intrigue around, and players and the teams have certainly helped in that cause.
I would agree. Hey, the NFL, they like the intrigue. They like the attention. You know why?
Dollar bills.
They like the money. Absolutely. So before we get into the draft, a couple things I want to let you guys know. I've got my phone here with me. Patrick's got his. We got the computer up and going. If you see us looking down on our phones, we've got our Twitter activations going. The Combine is going on right now, so we're trying to keep up with the most up-to-date information. I do have one other rumor I want to throw out there that I did not warn you I was going to throw out there.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to happen, but where there's smoke, there's potential fire. What do you think about the potential trade sending Derrick Henry to the Buffalo Bills?
Well, for 2 years now, Buffalo has really been in on the running back rumor mill, if you will. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Last year, they obviously draft James Cook. His usage from a fantasy football perspective wasn't... I mean, I drafted him. I have him in our Draft on Stash League. I'm certainly a buyer of his, but I'm skeptical that they could be interested in a running back But at the end of the day, if you look at their needs, they've got some needs along the offensive line. Josh Allen did a lot of running last year. They've got some needs on the defensive side of the ball. They might have to replace Jordan Poyer in the secondary.
Yep.
So there's a lot of needs there, and I'm skeptical that that they're going to want to use some of their cap flexibility to bring in an aging running back who's close to 30 years of age, and he's $12-13 million on their payroll.
And starting to show some wear on the tread.
He is. He's not getting any younger. He's certainly not. And that's a position, of course, that you can find a starting running back in the third or fourth round.
Yeah, and if they really wanted to shoot for it, what's that running back? Bijan Robinson out of Texas?
Yeah, well,
if they really wanted to go for it, there's answers in the draft.
Well, there certainly are, but it's not just Bijan Robinson. Bijan is likely to go in the top 15 somewhere. There are some people that believe that he could be safely inside the top 10.
Hefty price tag for a running back in the draft.
He is, and don't tell our fantasy counterparts this, he's a generational talent at the running back position.
I think they probably will already know by then.
Yeah, they'll probably have a pretty good idea. But he's got generational talent. He's going to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. He can run inside. He can run outside. He's fast. He breaks tackles. He's got great vision.
Make this guy sound like Bo Jackson.
He is a stud. He's been a stud now for 2 years at Texas. I just don't see them being able to grab him. Now, one guy they might be able to get their hands on is Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs is a fantastic running back. He's got first-round potential. He may or may not go in the first round. I mean, these things are really hard to kind of tell. It depends on the needs of the back end of the first round. Maybe somebody comes up. Maybe they fall. It depends on the depth that some of the GMs and the scouting staffs view the running back class. But there's some skill there. But there's plenty of holes that they've got to fill too.
All right, so I got to ask you this because this guy's on your dynasty league and he's a free agent. Any chance Josh Jacobson's up out there?
No, I think there were some reports, and I'd have to look, but I believe Oakland, a report came out either maybe this morning or maybe last night that Oakland was interested in tagging Jacobs, which makes
I could see
potentially a lot of sense. They've got Carr coming off their books, which will save them about $40 million. You can now afford a 10, 11, $12 million running back. And anybody who watched Jacobs last year, that was not the Jacobs we've seen in years past.
No, and yeah, I would have loved it. He was actually, go back out on the channel and watch the MVP show that we did at the conclusion of the year last year. He was in my top 2 for MVP of the season. The only reason he lost out is because Justin Fields was one of those guys that didn't even get drafted and elevated their teams.
Yeah,
that took him. But yeah. Jacobs was my number.
Well, who's
number
pretty
2,
good,
number 3.
Who was pretty good? That Philadelphia quarterback. I believe most teams took him in. I believe I got him in the 7th or 8th round last year.
Yeah,
that one turned out pretty good.
Yeah,
that one turned out pretty good. So,
yeah, he's another one of those guys that ended up being a better passer this year than I thought he was going to. I mean, everybody knows he can run the ball, but not saying that what Hurts did is Josh Allen-esque as far as turning around with the passing, but he developed more than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of commentators and people around Philadelphia will tell you that if you look going back to his college days at Alabama and then at Oklahoma and then working his way into the NFL with Doug Peterson and then transitioning now to Nick Sirianni, he going into this year, he had been under like 4 or 5 different offensive coordinators in his last 5 seasons. So his ability to kind of settle in with an offensive staff and a particular system, because he was only at Alabama not Alabama, excuse me. He was only at Oklahoma for a year before he went to the NFL. So he's been jumping all over. The ability to settle into a system is an incredibly important skill, or an incredibly important thing for any quarterback. So
absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the draft. So I'm going to go ahead and get this ball rolling here because as a Bears fan and as the way things stand right now on March 4th, the Bears still have the number 1 overall pick. Therefore, the NFL draft right now starts with the Bears. and there are a lot of options on the table. And as a Bears fan, I'm excited about that. Now, I'm not excited the fact that we have the first overall pick, because that means we sucked pretty bad last year.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, so, I mean, but let's get this rolling. So the Bears have a few options. And as a Bears fan, I'm just going to go those options real quick. I'm going to ask for your opinion. I'm going to give my opinion. I want to take a little bit deeper dive. So, the first option is the Bears keep that number 1 pick. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying that the Bears might be out there to go ahead and draft a quarterback. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think, Patrick, you and I have talked about the smoke and mirrors, the smoke show that goes on. I think Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, is doing a good job of throwing a lot of misdirection out there. A lot of different potentials. Hey, we could keep the pick. We could trade back once. We could trade back twice. We could trade back here. We could trade back there. We could go after a quarterback and trade Justin Fields. We can draft a quarterback. We can stick with one of our positional needs, which is defensive line. You got a couple studs right up there at the top. So I'm going to go over each one of these options real quick. And, so the first option is you keep the number 1 overall pick. Now, they are not going to trade Justin Fields. But like I told you before we started recording, I'm glad they put that out there as a possibility. It is the GM's job to put everything out there to try to maximize the most value you can get for the assets that you have. And by putting that out there, they're planting that seed that the Bears may take a quarterback. So these quarterback-needy teams, and there's a few of them out there. I mean, obviously you got Houston at number 2. Mm-hmm. You got Colts at number 4. But you got teams like the Panthers. As things stand right now, you got the Raiders. Mm-hmm. Because they haven't landed one of these free agents.
Atlanta,
Tampa. I mean, there's some quarterback-needy teams out there. If you believe the reports, the New York Giants might be in on it because, Daniel Jones is asking for way more money than
$45 million.
He's never going to get that. That's a joke.
Maybe on a 1-year basis he does, but the idea of paying that guy for 3 or 4 years and getting $135 or $180 million is just ludicrous.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of quarterback-needy teams, and Poles has to put these rumors out there in order to drum up the interest. Now, I will say, as a Bears fan, if the Bears keep the number 1 overall pick, I will be disappointed. And it's not that the talent... I mean, I would love to have Will Anderson. I'd still love to have Jalen Carter. At this point, we need more details, and we'll have that before the draft. I would love to have those guys on my team, right? But the Bears have so many needs. We need wide receiver help. We need offensive line help. We need defensive line help. We need linebacker help. We need help in the secondary. I would like to see them trade that pick, get as many picks back in return this year, next year. If they keep that pick, I will be disappointed.
Yeah, I don't think there's there's any other way to surmise that than exactly how you did. They have so many positions of need in this draft. And one of the reasons I actually thought early on that some of the trading Fields stuff was interesting is because in a year, you're going to have to pay Fields. Mm-hmm. And as we all know, if you want to win a Super Bowl in this league, you've basically got to be on a rookie contract or have an elite quarterback.
Yeah.
So they obviously think Fields is the guy, which means you're going to have to take the elite quarterback route, and he's got to be the guy. And you're going to have to find a way to build through the draft. And a great way to do it is acquiring a lot of picks. And unless you are convinced that there is a generational talent in this draft that justifies not trading back, you have to trade back. Houston obviously seems like a great partner in that. Potentially Indianapolis opens up scenarios, but yeah, I think trading back is...
Well, and what makes it so interesting, so I'm also a Colts fan. If you've been watching the show, you know that. And Patrick, you're a big Colts fan too. What makes this so interesting is that not only are there 2 needy teams in the top 5, Houston at number 2, Indy at number 4. You can maybe throw Seattle in there. I'm not buying it. I think Geno proved enough last year to show that he's capable. He's not elite, though.
No.
He's not elite, so we could see that. But what makes that really interesting is not only do you have 2 quarterback-needy teams, possibly 3 in the top 5, 2 of those teams are in-division rivals with Houston and Indy. So if either one of those guys knows who they want, they may trade up to that spot just to block the other in-division team. So, I'm gonna say this because, Jim Irsay, love him, hate him. I've got a love-hate relationship. Sometimes I love him, sometimes I hate him.
Don't we all?
You know, he opened his mouth and he's talking about Bryce Young. If that was Chris Ballard out there saying that, I would say, you know, maybe he's planning a seated out. I'm not sure Irsay is smart enough to do that. I think he just has mouth diarrhea.
Yeah, and see, I think most rational football fans will come to that conclusion. But being that it is draft season, there are smoke screens galore.
Would it be funny if Ballard is the one that told him to go out and say that?
In the conspiracy theory part of my brain, there is a part of me. I mean, Irsay has done absolutely no one in that front office any favors in terms of meddling in things this year, whether it's with Frank Reich, whether it's with the quarterback decision going from Matt Ryan to Sam Ehlinger to Nick Foles back to Sam Ehlinger. He's been incredibly involved, and it would be very easy for any football fan to come to the conclusion that this is just Irsay sticking his foot in his mouth as he always does. But Ballard is quite savvy.
He is. Do you think he went up to him and said, "Jim, you owe me one"?
Maybe. I hope, because it would be incredibly savvy that if everyone in the league, everyone around the league, all the fans know that Irsay's got a big mouth, and the idea that maybe you put out some information in there, and maybe they can. There's also an aspect of this too. If they can get Houston to trade up for a guy that they don't necessarily believe is their guy, you get an in-division rival that pays a king's ransom for a guy that you never had any intention of drafting in the first place. And then you get your guy potentially increasing the likelihood of falling just a little bit farther. And then who knows? Maybe you have to trade up to 2 with Chicago from there, or maybe Chicago sticks and picks, and then maybe you swap with Arizona to get your guy, so you don't have a Vegas or Atlanta or Carolina coming up and jumping and stealing your guy. But this is what makes NFL draft season so incredibly intriguing.
It's so much fun. I love this. So, excuse me, from a Bears fan's perspective, I'm going to tell you what I hope will happen. But I'm also going to tell you, I don't think there's a snowball's chance, and you know what, of this actually happening. The ultimate goal, as a Bears fan, would be for Houston to trade up to number 1, Bears drop back to number 2, and then the Bears trading back again to number 4 with Indy so they can come up and grab who they want. There's a couple dark horses in here. I think there's a couple key players that are not getting enough attention, and that is Arizona with the number 3 pick.
Definitely.
And Carolina, I believe they're number 9? Yeah, Carolina at number 9. You know, everybody assumes that Arizona is going to stay put and take one of these elite defensive linemen because they need it. J.J. Watt retired. It was already a position of need even before he retired. But Arizona has more holes too. Arizona may be sitting out there very quietly thinking, we're going to be the ones trading back, loading up on picks. So,
they've got positions of need everywhere. They're potentially going to lose DeAndre Hopkins this year. With as much buzz as around a guy like Quentin Johnson out of TCU, maybe they grab a guy there to give Kyler a weapon when he gets back in the second half of the year, and going forward, maybe something like that. Maybe they could use an offensive lineman. Their defense, they've got a number of holes. They drafted Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson a couple years ago with a very high pick, and even though he's got incredible raw tools, he's not developed into the Pro Bowl Defensive Player of the Year type caliber talent they thought he'd be. Budda Baker's a great safety in the secondary, but other than that, they don't have a lot in the back in the secondary. So trading back for them makes a lot of sense. And yeah, a guy or a team like whether it's Vegas, Atlanta, Carolina, it's very easy to see them potentially trading up and Arizona trading back and getting some pieces.
Right, and you know, if you're Arizona sitting there too, you've got your quarterback in Kyler Murray, but you already know he's going to miss the first half of the season. So if you're Arizona's front office, you're probably thinking, if you're being realistic, you're probably thinking, we're probably not going to go anywhere next year because our starting quarterback, our franchise quarterback, is going to be out. Let's go ahead and just, next year is a retooling. I don't want to say rebuilding, is retooling year anyway with our quarterback being out. Let's trade back and fill these holes. Because there's no one player on this list that's going to fix all their problems either.
Yeah,
so
next year is quite clearly to me, and I agree, is probably a tanking year. One thing I've heard around some commentators around the league speculate is potentially a guy like Carson Wentz
Oh yeah,
going out to Arizona.
Stopgap.
He'd be a nice stopgap option. If you remember back in Indianapolis, I believe he finished that year, and there was a lot of people that weren't very happy, and he made a lot of decisions that made a lot of us Colts fans go crazy. But if you look at the entirety of his season, he threw for over 3,000 yards. He had 25 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. I mean, they're not elite numbers, but those are serviceable quarterback numbers. And if you look at that division, they're going to have to play the 49ers twice. They're going to have to play the Rams, who should get Stafford back twice. Mm-hmm. There's no shortage of talent on that roster. And they're going to have to play a Seattle team now that apparently is a playoff team. So
who saw that coming?
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe they try to bring a guy in, but tanking certainly seems where they're likely to go.
Right. So, and I want to make something else clear here, too, because Houston, I've just said as a Bears fan, I would like to see the Bears trade back with Houston so that we may possibly be able to trade back again. We have so many needs. We need so many picks. I said this argument to another one of my friends, and they said, well, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to go to Houston. They're not going to draft a quarterback. And listen, even if Jimmy G goes to Houston, they're drafting a quarterback. I really don't think that Jimmy G is going to be the long-term answer, and they're going to want a long-term answer. I think they finally got the head coaching position correct.
Well,
so
I think that there's, outside of Carr and potentially Rodgers, and if you want to include Jackson on that, there's a lot of quarterbacks kind of in that second tier, and they've got to go somewhere.
Yep.
Whether it's Vegas, whether it's Atlanta to start over who's the guy they drafted out of Cincinnati last year? Desmond Ridder.
Ridder, yeah, Ridder.
Whether they start him, maybe they go with a veteran. There's a lot of butts to put in seats here, and it's hard to rule anybody out at this point. And yeah, I mean, if they take Garoppolo, there's absolutely nothing going to stop them from drafting whoever they believe is their guy at quarterback.
Right, because Garoppolo is a good quarterback. Yep. He's not a long-term franchise quarterback. He's not. So I'm going to throw this out there too, because been hearing a lot of buzz lately around Tennessee. Yeah, they're going to bring back Tannehill. They'd like to bring him back one more year. Yeah, they drafted Malik Hooker last year. Malik Hooker did not look like an NFL quarterback last year.
Malik Willis.
I'm sorry, yeah. Malik Willis. I'm thinking of the guy from Tennessee. Right? Isn't that his name? Hooker? Hendon Hooker.
Hendon Hooker, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jason, don't kill me for that. I know you've been on the show a few times. You're a huge Tennessee Vols fan. Don't kill me for that. I should have gotten that one right. But, Tennessee is another dark horse that might be going out there looking at the quarterback market and saying, hey, we don't have a guy on this team that we think is the future.
Yeah, they're a volatile team. I could see them going really in either direction. They could certainly tear it down. They're sitting at number 11 right now behind Philadelphia. They're a team that could go in a lot of different directions. Remember, they're in the AFC South. Jacksonville's going to be favored going into the year to win that division. Yep. So it's possible they tank. It's possible they don't even bring back Tannehill, and maybe they let Willis start. I doubt it, but it's possible. I don't view Willis as a starting caliber, maybe not even a backup quarterback. There's a lot of holes in his game, and to me, I could see them bringing Tannehill back, but I could just as easily see them bringing in Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
They drafted a first round receiver last year who's got some talent. They've still got I'm blanking now on the running back. Help me out here. Henry.
Yeah, Derrick Henry.
They've still got Derrick Henry in the backfield, so they've got some options there. Vrabel is widely considered one of the best coaches in the league, so he's going to be able to maximize talent. And they're in a division that, again, Jacksonville's going to be favored. And even though Doug Peterson's a good head football coach and Trevor Lawrence is potentially a franchise caliber starting quarterback, there's nothing that I saw out of them last year that says this is a surefire thing.
No, for sure.
And Tennessee has a long history of being thorns in team sides, so it could go in a lot of different directions.
I could see that too. So, yeah, I mean, as a Bears fan and a Colts fan, obviously, if the Colts have somebody that they are adamant, if Ballard says this is the guy, I would like to see the Colts make that trade, because I want my Colts to have the franchise quarterback that they want. Mm-hmm. And I want my Bears to still have that top 5 pick so that possibly they can land Will Anderson. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. Jalen Carter's stock may drop. I still think the Bears had something to do with that. We talked about that before the video. It's going to be interesting to see if his stock falls, and if it does, how much.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I've heard some conflicting stories on this. We're still early in the process, so it's hard to know. But we have to remember, first off, he's innocent until proven guilty. Secondly, these are misdemeanor charges. There's a TikTok I saw the other day, or not a TikTok, excuse me, a tweet that I saw on Twitter the other day, and it was of Hannibal Lecter, and it was if Lecter could run a 4.3, he would have been classified as having an eating disorder. So the NFL will find a way. If you have enough talent, they'll find a space for you.
Yep.
So it's important to remember that if the talent is there, he'll find his way.
I agree. So as a Bears fan, I would like to see those 2 trades in the top 5. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's realistic. I do think a trade in the top 5 is very realistic. In order for a team like Atlanta or Carolina to move up, obviously they're going to get a steeper price because they're moving out of the top 5. They're still in the top 10, but moving out of the top 5.
Yeah.
But man, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter just both look really good, but there's other options out there.
Well, and there certainly are, and what people have to remember too is that the defensive line class in this year's draft is incredibly talented. If you listen to a lot of NFL draft experts, they'll tell you you've got guys like Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame who, going into this year, was a potential top 10 pick, and he's on the fringe of top 5 defensive linemen. Mm-hmm. So you've got an incredible amount of depth at that position. So if you're looking for an elite edge rusher, they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot. I know the Bears don't have an early second round pick. They traded that to Pittsburgh. Was that?
Yeah, that was the Claypool.
That was the Claypool trade.
Yep.
But there's some flexibility. They've got an early third round, that first pick in the third round, that they've got some maneuverability. Maybe they find a way to package that if they find their guy. I don't know. Maybe they move down from 1, acquire some stuff, and maybe that allows them to sneak back into the first round. I don't know, but I think there's a lot of potential here where you could see the Bears make more than one trade.
I agree.
In that first round. And again, they're going to need an offensive lineman. You could see them drafting Paris Johnson or Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern. They've got very real needs, obviously, on the defensive line with no shortage of talent to be had in this draft. You could certainly see that. I mean,
I like to see a wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that. It's going to be hard given the fact that they don't have that second round pick. But again, if you look at historically speaking, the most successful receivers have been picked in the last decade in the second round. Mm-hmm. It's for whatever reason, guys that come in with fewer expectations have just been able to hit at a higher rate.
Probably going to better teams too, because those studs are getting drafted early in the draft because those teams early in the draft aren't doing so hot.
Yeah, certainly.
Certainly. Yeah, so I mean, there's just a lot of needs. What I could see is the Bears trading within the top 5 one time, and then trading back, still in the top 10 to 15 range. So 2 trades in the first round. I just don't think it's going to be 2 within the top 5. I could see that.
It's unlikely. It's certainly unlikely.
I mean, that would be, for the Bears, what we would like to see is Aaron Rodgers retire. That's one and it's not because we hate Aaron Rodgers. We do, but that's not why. It's one less free agent quarterback, meaning there's going to be more teams looking for a quarterback in the draft.
More leverage for that first
More leverage for that pick, yep. One less guy to fill one of those seats that needs to be filled. So see Aaron Rodgers retire and get those two trades in the top 5. Pipe dreams. Of course, having said that, we never thought we were going to wind up with the first overall pick. Lovie Smith, thank you for doing us a solid.
Yeah. That guy should have been fired for that alone. I mean, I know he was likely out the door anyway. But
yeah, they actually announced it before that game that he was.
Goodness gracious, man!
Thank you, Lovey.
Goodness, what are you doing?
Doing the Bears a solid. That's what he's doing. Bears.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to turn it over to you because I want you to kind of do a rundown here. I've talked about my Bears. I've talked a little bit about the Colts. I don't want to go too much on the Colts. I want to save some of that meat on the bone for you. Mm-hmm. But this is where I'm just going to kind of step aside and let you go because, like I said, I don't know the college game. I can look at these teams and tell you what they need. I can't tell you on these lists who the best guy is for that and why.
Well, as you look, Ken, we kind of move out of the top four because the draft is it's so much of it's unknown because of that top four. It's going to be very difficult to know. But when you start to look at, let's say, 5 through 9, there's a lot. I mean, it is. You've got Seattle, Detroit, Las Vegas, and Atlanta, and all four of those teams are. Seattle could conceivably compete for a playoff position next year. Mm-hmm. You could see them. I mean, hypothetically, they could draft a quarterback. That's not completely out of the question.
Right.
Unlikely, but it's possible. Mm-hmm. They could draft some defensive guys because you certainly don't need receivers. They drafted Kenneth Walker last year, so they're good there. Their offensive line's solid, but they could stick and pick a guy there. There's obviously elite edge rushers they could take. Mm-hmm. They could go in a lot of different directions. It's very easy to see them sticking and picking an elite player there. It's also not out of the question that they move back because there's a lot of quarterback needy teams, and if you get a Will Levis out of Kentucky, if you get an Anthony Richardson, depending on your evaluation of him out of Florida, or maybe there's a fifth quarterback that comes out of this, or maybe C.J. Stroud falls. I mean, there's a lot of people forgetting that there was speculation that he wasn't going to be a top 10 quarterback because he doesn't have any particular trait that really stands out. He's a very well-rounded quarterback, but he's not somebody that's going to jump off the page. And in his last year at Ohio State, he wasn't that great. I mean, he wasn't. He was a Heisman contender, but it turns out when to win the Heisman, you basically got to win 10 football games. You got to compete for a conference title. And you've basically got to be a quarterback to win the Heisman. And he checked all those boxes. So almost by default, he was in the discussion. But you've got a lot of teams with a lot of potential needs that could trade up there. And whether it's Atlanta's sitting at 8. They could trade up. They could move up and draft their guy. Carolina obviously has those needs. The wild card for me is number 10. What is Philadelphia going to do?
They had a top 10 pick, and what do they need? Yeah.
The answer's nothing.
Right. The rich get richer in this case.
The rich get richer. Or, well, in this case, it's New Orleans sending them a first-round pick for what reason? And then they give Chauncey Gardner-Johnson away last year to the Eagles, who turned out to be one of the best corners in football for basically nothing.
Right.
So, they're actually a team that's been rumored that they might take Bijan Robinson. If you look in draft markets right now, DraftKings, at this point in time, he was a plus 275 favorite to go to Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. That's certainly a possibility if they let Miles Sanders walk. They like him, but Sirianni and that coaching staff has, for years, Philadelphia has been a 2, 3, 4 running back by committee.
Right. Well, and I'm a Kenneth Gainwell guy anyway.
Oh, isn't everybody at this point?
Yeah, I'm a Kenneth Gainwell guy, and I have been for a couple Years. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott. Miles Sanders is a good player. Mm-hmm. He's a good player. He's not a great running back, and I mean, so this is one of those ones where you could possibly see a running back go in the top 10. In this case, it kind of makes sense. Philadelphia, do you think they're going to trade out of that spot? And the reason I ask this is, everybody thought a couple years ago that Justin Fields was going to be taken early. Mac Jones was going to be taken early. Mm-hmm. They both fell.
Yeah, they did, and so, I think me personally speaking, I think there's a very real chance that this Anthony Richardson stuff's a largely smoke for our listeners and viewers. Some of you might remember the Malik Willis smoke. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be Kenny Pickett? Is it going to be Malik Willis? Who's going to be the first quarterback off the board? Well, it wasn't Malik Willis. And it seems like a lot of this Anthony Richardson smoke is centered around draft season. Because if you watched him play at Florida this year, you saw a guy that was incredibly inconsistent. Yeah, he's got raw tools. He's got the big arm. He's going to run probably a 4.4. He's got elite speed. He's got the size. A lot of people are trying to compare him to Cam Newton, as if Cam Newton wasn't an absolutely elite collegiate football player, and I believe won the Heisman while he was at Auburn.
Yes, he did. Yeah. Won the Heisman, won a national title.
Yeah, and needless to say, Richardson did not. So there's a lot of reasons you could see somebody getting infatuated with the size and the speed, and he's apparently a high character guy. So if you can get on the chalkboard and you can draw it up, a lot of NFL offensive coordinators and head coaches will fall in love with that, and maybe somebody trades up
Yeah, because I'm looking at this, and let's say one of those quarterbacks drop. You have the Jets sitting there at 13. That if they don't get Derek Carr, they're going to be looking for a quarterback. I can see Washington going for a quarterback. Tampa Bay needs a quarterback. I could see some movement there.
Well, and you've got wild cards too, like New England. New England has historically been a team that will trade back. They'll trade up occasionally. They're all over the place. Some of you might remember they drafted, I believe, Cole Strange. I don't know if it was last year or the year before. Most NFL commentators had him going in the third round, and they took him in the 20s. Yeah. So they can be, and that's what happens when you let your head football coach also be your general manager. Bill right. Belichick can be kind of all over the place in terms of his general managing role. So it's impossible to know. And my question for everybody, and I know it's probably still a little bit too early to tell, but is Mac Jones the guy?
I don't think so.
I don't think so
But
either.
I didn't think so coming out of... So, like I don't follow the college game like you guys do, but I don't know if you remember, we were talking before the draft when the Bears had it. I mean, I know I told Adam and Teresa and Jordan and my other friends, I did not want Mac Jones. Justin Fields was the quarterback as a Bears fan that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And by the way, folks, I know that sitting down there at number 26 is the New York Giants, and they're going to need a quarterback too because Daniel Jones is not worth $45 million. But there is no way that Philly's going to trade all the way back to 26, especially when it's with the Giants. So, yes, I know they need a quarterback. I did not forget about them. That's not going to happen. All right, sorry.
Well,
Tangent.
I mean, I think that what we're likely to see, if Daniel Jones thinks he's going to get some kind of long-term extension, I know we touched on this briefly. If he thinks he's going to get a 3 or 4 year deal in the Dak Prescott range of money, he's out of his mind. It's not happening. You might get a bridge situation where they give him a franchise tag and he makes $35 million, or maybe they give him like a 2-year, $80 or $90 million deal to get him back in the building. But the way it looks like they're going to bring back Saquon, probably on a franchise tag, because only crazy people pay running backs anymore, and my Colts will be one of them probably this year when they pay Taylor. An elite player. I don't misconstrue what I'm saying, but that argument's been settled. If you want to be elite in this game, you've got to draft running backs, and they've got to pan out, because if you pay them. It's really hard to pay a quarterback. It's really hard to pay receivers and edge rushers and offensive linemen and corners when you're paying a running back $14 or $15 million. Yeah,
I agree. And as a Bears fan, I love David Montgomery. But if you've been watching the show, you know how I feel about Khalil Herbert. Sorry, David Montgomery, you're probably not worth the price you're going to be looking for. And we've already got Khalil Herbert, who I think is even better, right behind you, still on a rookie deal.
Yeah, so. And yeah, you're certainly not wrong there. Looking further, I also wonder about Green Bay at 15. They're kind of at a place now where I'm not sure they know where they want to go. Obviously, they've got the Aaron Rodgers saga looming over them as he creeps his way out of the cave in Oregon. And we'll see kind of where that goes. But there's a lot of speculation around the commentators out of Green Bay that Jordan Love might be an MVP caliber player. And if he is, you just drafted Christian Watson out of North Dakota State last year. You've got Romeo Doubs out of, I believe, Kentucky, who really came on strong. There was a lot of people in the preseason saying that he might be a guy to look out for Rookie of the Year. Mm-hmm. He definitely made some plays for a mid-round guy. You've got Aaron Jones. You've got A.J. Dillon there. You've got got some defensive playmakers, and Preston Smith still there. Jair Alexander's still there. They could go in a lot of different directions depending on how they view Jordan Love, but they could just as easily take another receiver there, possible, or maybe they take an offensive lineman. Maybe it's hard to know. They're kind of in that take best player available part of the draft.
Yeah, and I could see that too. All right, we're going to wrap this one up because we are already at the 45-minute mark. We're going to come back for part 2. I want to ask you more questions about the end of the first round. I want to talk to you about some positional breakdowns too. There's some quarterbacks out here. We're hearing a lot of buzz. I just don't get it. I'm going to be one of the first ones to say it. I think this may be one of the weakest quarterback classes that we've seen in a long time, but everybody's hyping it up. A lot of it might be smoke and mirrors. I'm not seeing it. I'm going to lay out my argument for like what is going on here, and I want you to tell me if I'm right or if you think I'm full of you know what.
Okay.
All right, folks, so stay tuned for part 2. We'll see you here shortly.